Start in a minute. Hello. Hey, everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ and Friends. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and today is the second Wednesday of the month, which means it's time for Hammer Your Way to Health live Q&A with Dr. Alan Goldhamer, where he answers your questions. Please welcome him back to the show. Hi, Dr. Goldhamer. How are you doing today?
Hello, AJ.
Well, it was wonderful seeing you in Las Vegas. What did you think of the event?
Oh, it was fabulous. That was surprisingly enjoyable. Las Vegas wouldn't be what I would normally think of as the, bastion of healthful living or whatever, but it was so unusual to have excellent food in an entertaining venue. You had fabulous people. It was really enjoyable seeing all the different people, many of which we'd actually, seen over the years, or I just found it was a lot of fun.
I'm so glad you were there. And, a lot of people said, well, why are you doing a conference in Las Vegas? It's Sin City. Well, where else needs health more than that, right?
It really was a contrast having a health conference in Las Vegas. I just thought that was great.
Yeah. Yep. And the food was wonderful, just the way you like it, SOS free, low
Right.
caloric density, high volume. I thought for the first time ever, the chefs did a tremendous job and they'll only improve from.
Yeah. I just, it'd be nice to see him serving that kind of food all the time instead of just when AJ's in town.
Right. And you were so gracious. People wanted your picture and you were just so present for the people. And I know they appreciated it very much. And then you had something wonderful happen in your life. You were on the #2 podcast, at least I think in the world, if not in, yeah, probably in the world, called
Yeah.
Diary CEO. I was not familiar with that podcast until another one of the plant-based doctors, Dr. Roger Schwelt, went on it. But tell us how that transpired and what the experience of being on that show was like.
Well, originally I got a call actually while I was going to your event in Mexico, and they said that they had an opening and they wanted me to come and do the show like that day. And I said, well, I'd love to do it. What a great opportunity. They have, 12 million subscribers. It's a huge show all over the world. But I said, there's no way I'm going to piss off AJ because, she terrifies me. So I said I couldn't do it, but I could do it maybe another time. And so they said, oh, yeah, come to, New York and do it on a date. And then it turned out they had an opening in LA. So I drove, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, or no, a week ago. I don't know. It wasn't very long ago, but I went to LA 2 weeks ago and we did this show. And it was a really interesting process of filming the show with this guy. He was his 33rd birthday. He's a young guy, very successful entrepreneur. And we talked for 2.5 hours. And a week later, they came out with an edited version of it. It was an hour, 21 minutes. And for some reason, it's really taken off. We've had 2 million views in the first week. So, when you think about how many people that is, it's a lot. And the consequence has been we've had literally hundreds of inquiry calls. And, I've been spending 12 hours a day just returning, contact calls and stuff. So it's been a very kind of intense and interesting experience. And we've gotten exposed to a lot of people that never knew about us, that would have no idea about fasting or anything except for that show. And it does show me how big a world there is out there that really needs to have the kind of information that you and I have been talking about now for decades.
That is
Um,
really interesting because, I know that a lot of good fortune came to you through the Rich Roll podcast, but I would imagine that at least many of Rich's viewers or listeners are plant-based. Whereas I feel like in this particular case, because isn't he himself kind of following more of a keto diet?
well, he's kind of open-minded and doing a lot of different things, as some people do. Uh, Hopefully, he'll be shifting more towards healthful eating now, and maybe we'll get him out to do a fast and really move him more in a health promoting direction. But his viewers definitely represent a wide variety of diet and lifestyle approaches.
Yeah.
I think about half of his people are England, and because I can tell we're getting so many calls from England and Australia. And also, he's got a presence here in the United States now that's quite strong.
Yeah, I noticed that his
And
most recent one, because I listened to it once now and it's like showing up in my
Mhm.
feed, it was about the keto diet being so great, you know?
Well, he had a guest that was advocating, yeah, the keto diet. But that's why I was so impressed that he had me come on because he knew he wasn't going to get that information from me. And apparently, from what they've told me, the success of the show that I did with them is really good, and they're very happy with the response they've got, and they've got a lot of new members. So I think a lot of the people that know the work that we're doing have signed up so they can kind of hear what he has to say and what his guest has to say. Typically, he's been working with, more celebrity oriented people, and so I think it's unusual for him to have somebody like me on the show.
I find because, we're recently at True North, and I find that sometimes, if people come from me or Dr. Furman, they generally understand the plant-based diet and that if they're going there to fast for a reason, that they're going to continue the plant-based diet when they're there. But you do get sometimes people that come there that aren't even familiar with a plant-based diet, and I think they sometimes think they're just going to fast and be better and then go back to what they were doing.
Right. Well, we try to help educate them while they're there with our classes and lectures, and oftentimes once they experience what it means to eat healthfully and the benefits of that, they often will are able to make a shift and give up the uh, previous, misconceptions and adopt something
Yeah.
that's actually going to be sustainable.
Because I love going to your lectures on Monday. And by the way, it's completely free to watch all the lectures at True North, even when you're not a patient. You just have to create a free account. And it's so interesting to me, like the questions that people ask you over and over, the same things. Well, what's wrong with dairy and what's wrong with salmon? It's like they're not plant-based at all, in other words.
Right. Well, it's good for everybody to get, that information for the first time, and it also helps reinforce people that are, you know, they know the right thing, but sometimes it's good to remind them about all the basic principles. So we try to, cover the full spectrum of information that's necessary for people.
Well, you've got a big trip coming up. So what are you going to do in Lithuania? That sounds like a very long
Well,
flight.
yeah, it's a long flight. There's a, it's not a health seminar, but they're having a group of 300 CEOs. These are people that run, big companies and have lots of employees. And for some reason, they decided that they wanted to have me come and give a presentation on fasting and the work that we're doing. And so I'm going to fly there for the seminar and give a talk on fasting.
Wow, well, that's really cool. Well, congratulations. So, if any of you were at the Plant Powered Party, you know that Dr. Goldhamer's fabulous talk did not allow time for questions. And so, we're going to ask the questions now that didn't get asked at the conference. So, this will benefit all of you anyway, but those especially that had asked the questions. So, you get this question a lot, and we've answered it, but everybody wants information on how to do an in home fast.
Yes. So the important thing with in-home fast is that it be done exactly the same way as it's done when people fast at the True North Health Center. And that means number one, you have to make sure you're a good candidate for fasting. Sometimes people are not good candidates for fasting and they have to do a juice fast or a modified program or shouldn't do any program at all. And the way you tell is by reviewing the medical history, doing a physical exam, and getting some basic lab work done. And that can rule out the things that would prevent you from doing a fast. The biggest and most obvious obstacle is that people are not able to rest. If you can't rest, you can't fast. You have to do some other type of approach. If you can rest, but you're on medications, those medications have to be withdrawn, but not all medications can be safely withdrawn. So you really have to talk to a doctor that's familiar with getting people off medication safely and not just arbitrarily discontinue drugs, particularly anticoagulants and others that there could be, very serious or fatal consequences from just arbitrary sudden withdrawal. So once you're a good candidate, that you're have baseline data, so you have something to compare back to, so physical exam and lab, then it's important to remember to rest. The mistake people make fasting most often is they're too active. And sometimes people feel so good fasting that they think, oh, well, I should go out and exercise because I'll lose more weight or something. And they will lose more weight, but the weight they lose won't be fat, it'll be muscle because they'll increase their glucose needs, which means they'll be breaking down protein through a process called gluconeogenesis. So what we want to do is maximize fat loss, and that means actually resting. It's not intuitively obvious, but it turns out to be fact. So you rest during fasting and you hydrate during fasting. Now, you can get carried away. People that try to force fluids during fasting can flush out their electrolytes and get into trouble. But we recommend that people are getting somewhere between 40 and 60 ounces of water a day. And one simple solution, one way to check is that, when you're urinating, the urine should not be overly concentrated. At the center, we're able to do urine testing and actually measure the specific gravity and kind of monitor that carefully. But um, if a person's fasting and they're resting and they're hydrating, generally they're going to have a good experience. And then the last thing that's important at home is that refeeding be done carefully and appropriately. One of the biggest problems is when people return to feeding too rapidly, they can get really sick. You can get post-fasting edema where your legs swell up. You can get even theoretically refeeding syndrome, where electrolyte imbalance could lead to serious problems or even death. So if you're going to fast, do it right or don't do it. It can be done for some people at home safely. Dr. Justin Wise on our staff does a lot of remote fasting supervision. People can get his assistance with that through our telemedicine off our website. And he will work with your local doctor for the necessary exam and lab and other things that are needed. We've actually written a book. It's called Can Fasting Save Your Life? And it has everything a person needs to know to understand fasting, but also it has everything their doctor needs to know to be able to help guide them through a fasting process. But please, if you're going to fast, do it properly so you have a safe and effective experience. Don't muck it up and then make fasting look bad.
Right. And by fasting, we mean water fasting, because there's a question in the
Yes.
chat from Diana saying, well, don't you get triple the results dry fasting? Isn't that, you can maybe explain what dry fasting is and how dangerous it is.
Well, dry fasting means you're not using water. And so, although there is a big hormetic effect of dry fasting, it's a very stressful system to the body, and so it stimulates, the body's defense mechanisms. It can be very dangerous because without having a solute, without having water, there's nothing for the body to put the toxins that it's mobilizing into and get rid of it. Most of the toxins eliminated in fasting, they don't come out of the bowels, they come out of the urine. The urine is the blood processed by the kidneys. And so it's in the urine that most of these products are eliminated. And if there's no water, what it's going to end up happening is you're going to put tremendous load on the kidneys, and the kidneys can even shut down. In fact, that happened to a rather prominent advocate of dry fasting when they died because they, went into kidney failure. So we don't want you to die, and we don't want you to have bad outcomes. And so if you're going to fast, we recommend that you include water so that your body can actually adapt to the fasting process properly and not get into a overly stressful situation that can result in damage to your kidneys or your body or end up with a terrible outcome.
Right. Yeah. I mean, on Yom Kippur, people, that is dry fasting.
Yeah, it's for a 24-hour period though.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's only for people that's appropriate. Under Jewish law, if it's not appropriate for you to do 24 hours of dry fasting, then it's permissible to include water uh, in that process. So.
Yeah. Thank you. So, how long and how often should healthy people fast?
Well, I think people should fast every single day. Every day they should be fasting. And that means they're not eating 3 to 4 hours before they go to bed. And that's going to give them a period of 12 hours of fasting, more or less. Now, if people are trying to lose weight, sometimes they might choose to extend that fasting period up to 16 hours by delaying breakfast until they've had a chance to do some exercise in the morning and preferentially burn some extra fat. But for people that are just trying to sustain weight, or for kids, people that burn a lot of calories, 12 hours of fasting, 12-hour feeding window usually works really well. Usually there's going to be time for three meals in that, large amounts of low density, high nutrition food like fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, and no meat, fish, fowl, eggs, dairy products, oil, salt, or sugar.
Perfect. Thank you. So, how do you determine the length and frequency of fasting for your body and stage of life and health? At which,
Well, that's why we do an exam, why we do laboratory testing, and why we monitor patients twice a day is to get feedback so we can make rational decisions about how to fast long enough to get the problem resolved, but not so long as to get into trouble. And that's where you're using laboratory and physical exam monitoring. Make sure you don't push a person too far. We know we can do that safely and effectively because we've done it for 40 years and we've done it 25,000 times. So we have a lot of experience making sure people don't go too long or fast inappropriately.
Great. Thank you. And here's a question from somebody who has fasted twice at True North last year. And they're wondering how often should they fast at home and for how long? Maybe once a month for 3 days?
No. What I think they should do is fast every day at home for 12 hours. And then if they need to fast for a longer period of time, and there's certainly, if there's a patient of True North Health, they just call and talk to their attending and come up with a game plan because it's going to vary from individual to individual what's ideal. For healthy people, what we're doing right now, and what would I do myself, and what we do with many of our staff, is we fast every day for 12 hours, and then once a year we fast for a week. And if at the end of that week of fasting everything is stable and looks good, that's it. We move back to healthy eating. If, on the other hand, people are having healing crisis or there's something to resolve, then we fast long enough to get the problem resolved. But it's a very individual situation, fasting duration, and you don't really know for sure until you see how the body responds to fasting.
Thank you. Okay, let me get back to the questions. Okay, for I guess this I think I know the answer, but what length of fast is safe for hypothyroidism? It's not necessarily the condition that determines the length of the fast, is it?
No, because some people with hypothyroidism may only need a short fast. Other people may need to fast up to 40 days. Some people may need several fasts. What makes fasting duration relevant is what kind of reserves do you have, both macronutrient and micronutrient reserves. For example, if a person's fasting and their potassium, for example, goes below 3.0, we're going to be moving into broth and juices and other things. If their sodium gets below 130, if there's certain parameters, and they're all laid out in our book, Can Fasting Save Your Life? We've laid out the parameters that we use as guidelines to determine fasting duration so that patients and their doctor that's helping monitor them can advise them appropriately.
Perfect. Thank you. How does fasting affect your microbiome? And do people who go on longer fasts have trouble getting back the microbes in their gut back in balance?
Oh, yeah. In fact, fasting, one of the big benefits of fasting may very well be rebooting that gut microbiome. So there's a huge drop off in both positive and negative components in the microbiome. There's literally 1,000 different strains of organisms, particularly bacteria, that live in the gut microbiome, trillions of living creatures. And when you think about it, these creatures are eating and drinking and defecating inside you. And what they poo in you can be very toxic, or it could be very helpful. Like it could be vitamin K, or it could be TMA, which becomes trimethylamine oxidase and associated with heart disease and cancer and all kinds of problems. So, what your organisms poo in you and which organisms you have in your gut is largely determined on what you put in your mouth. What you feed your organisms determines what they do and who they are. So, for example, if you're eating greasy, fatty, slimy, dead, decaying flesh type diet, you're going to have different organisms than people eating health promoting plant-based foods. And also what waste products come off from your organisms are going to be profoundly affected by the diet. Now, when you fast, the environment changes very dramatically. And basically, there's a big die off. And then when you refeed, if you refeed properly on whole plant foods, you grow back the organisms that are supposed to be living in there and that are living in the guts of people that eat healthy diets day in and day out. So it's a way of getting rid of the nasties, getting back the good guys, and getting that stuff back in balance. And that may be one of the reasons we see so many profound people resolving their not just GI related problems like colitis and Crohn's, etc., but also their autoimmune related conditions where their body's attacking itself because in part to gut leakage that allows organisms and also products to get into the bloodstream and trigger an inappropriate immunological response.
Thanks. Diana, who's watching live, would like to know, is it still considered fasting for 12 hours if you drink, say, chamomile tea at night?
Well, it's a modified version of fasting if you're drinking chamomile tea at night. What I would recommend is that you don't have anything except water 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed. So I would recommend not using any substances, uh, including herbs that can have drug-like effects and all kinds of secondary products. A lot of times people too, when they're buying herbs. They don't even think about the bags that they're drinking their tea out of have microplastics and other things that are getting into the food. So, just the general principle is try to eat whole foods. So if you're eating fruit, eat whole fruit. And if you're eating vegetables, try to have raw and cooked vegetables, not necessarily all these fractionated, packaged, processed crap that everybody's making the majority of their food.
Thanks. So, when you talk about fasting, are you referring to a water fast or a juice fast?
Well, I'm talking about fasting is the complete abstinence of all substances except water in an environment of complete rest. Juice fasting is basically feeding, but feeding on just, essentially the processed products of fruits or vegetables, so juice or vegetable juices. The advantage to juice fasting is that because the material is sweet, the juices are sweet, enjoy them, they're willing to take them. People that are not used to eating whole plant food diets don't like whole plant foods. They taste like disgusting, tasteless swill. Once they've eaten them long enough, or if after fasting, good foods start to taste good again. So it makes it more possible to get people to make that transition in a form that their palate will accept.
Thanks. Is it safe to water fast if you were recently diagnosed with AFib and are newly diabetic?
What's interesting about atrial fibrillation, which has become more and more common, and a little bit shocking, is that 50% of people diagnosed with AFib are dead within 5 years. I mean, it's a very serious problem. It's actually according to some data I saw recently, it has a higher short-term mortality rate than cancer. So with atrial fibrillation, we take it very seriously. There's at least a theoretical concern in atrial fibrillation that the hermetic dehydration that occurs in fasting could theoretically make a person more at risk for clots and whatnot. And it certainly isn't absolute protection. And more importantly, when people have atrial fibrillation, they're often on anticoagulant medication. And if you just stop the medication arbitrarily, that can increase your risk of stroke. And if you try to fast on those medications, the medications can become potentiated and that become a problem. So we do not fast patients on anticoagulant medication. We do not arbitrarily discontinue those medications. So the problem is you have to first make the dietary changes to reduce the need for the medication, then appropriately wean those medications, and then fast. And it can take as much as a year to get people stabilized off their anticoagulant medication safely. So this is definitely a condition that needs to be consulted with by a doctor who's familiar with fasting and with helping people navigate these slippery slopes. Now, the good news is a juice fast, for example, you can do in conjunction to atrial fibrillation because you don't have to discontinue the medication. In fact, you would continue the medication, do the juice fasting. It's slower, but it's also safer. And it would be a better strategy, perhaps, for somebody to consider than water-only fasting if they're dealing with anticoagulant therapy.
Thank you. Jackie, who's watching live, hi, Jackie, says, can you actually overeat fiber and it affect your digestive system at night, particularly discomfort on your left side when going to sleep and laying down?
Well, generally, overeating fiber wouldn't be likely unless you're taking supplemental fibers and these processed products that are designed to introduce fiber to people that don't eat any healthy food. But eating too much, so for example, vegetable materials, when people have conditions like ulcerative colitis, whatnot, definitely can be an issue. Sometimes we have to wean them back into handling those kind of foods by using mostly steamed and starchy vegetables or blended salads or other things because their colon has been debilitated. My suspicion isn't that you're eating too much fiber, it's that there's something wrong with the digestive system. And so it might be worth really going through and trying to carefully analyze what's going on with your digestion, which would explain why you're having difficulty at night. You should not be having pain at night. It's either overeating, eating the wrong thing, or eating beyond your digestive capacities. And so that has to be identified and then corrected.
Thanks. And we have a live viewer on Instagram named Janet asking, what about vegetable juicing? Because the juices at
Yeah.
True North, they're a combination, aren't they?
Well, we try to do as much vegetable as possible and just enough fruit juice to make it palatable. Sometimes straight vegetable juices can be a little bit harsh, but the combination, like for example, juices that we use commonly at True North Health are watermelon celery juice, which is a really good thing. Watermelon tends to be picked ripe. It's relatively lower in sugar, higher in mineral content than some other juices. Really well tolerated, low antigenic potential, and when combined with celery, creates a really nice blend that gives lots of minerals and is well tolerated. We also use apple celery and carrot celery apple juices, and those combinations often are well tolerated. We also use vegetable juices, sometimes straight vegetable juices, sometimes vegetable juices with a little bit of apple juice or something to make them more palatable. And we also use a lot of broths that we make from fresh vegetables that are high in electrolytes but low in calories. So we use a combination of all of those juices. Sometimes we'll use other melons or berry juices. We'll occasionally use citrus juices for some patients.
Thank you. Here's a question. Where can I get more information to share with my spouse? My memory isn't great.
Well, first of all, buy the book, Can Fasting Save Your Life? And then throw everything out that's in your bathroom and put it on the toilet in the bathroom, because then your spouse, when he's using the toilet, and if he's not eating healthily, he'll be in there a while and he'll have plenty of time to read the book. The other thing you can do is you can, you know, have him watch some of these different podcasts and shows like this so that he can get exposed to the information. And then when he becomes more interested in it, he may be more amenable to making the changes that you need to make. So I think that's one of the good things about these podcasts and shows is it gives people information in a format that they don't have to actually do much work.
Thanks. Is it safe for postmenopausal women to fast?
It is safe for postmenopausal and premenopausal women to
Perimenopausal?
fast.
Yeah,
Perimenopausal, the idea that, women are no longer capable of fasting if they reach a certain phase in their cycle is just really not true. That's not been our experience. A significant percentage of our patients are postmenopausal women, and they do great.
thanks. I tell people about True North all the time. They always ask for case studies. How can I get those case studies?
If you go to our website at truenorthhealth.com or the fasting site of the foundation, fasting.org, all of our published case studies are presented. And these have all been published in peer-reviewed journals and have been vetted. We also have our studies. And if you read the book, Can Fasting Save Your Life? Many of those published studies are cited and described in our book.
Perfect. Thank you. Has fasting ever helped with tinnitus?
Yeah, tinnitus is a ringing in the ears. It can have different causes. Some of it's nerve damage, some of it's inflammation. Some of it does go away in fasting. The problem is we can't tell who's who. We don't know in advance if they're going to go get well or not. We know in hindsight when it goes away, then we pretend like we knew. But the reality is it's hard to tell who's going to respond and who's not. Some people don't respond at all. Some people have complete resolution.
Great. How, what can I do while fasting to prevent headaches?
Well, you can't. If you're coming off caffeine, if you're an addict, if you drink coffee, chocolate, cola, you're going to have some headaches when you first withdraw. Well, that's the reason we ask people to stop those a few days before they start fasting, because then they don't have to adapt to fasting and adapt to their drug addiction at the same time. So caffeine is a highly addictive nervous system stimulant. It shouldn't be used, in my opinion, by people. And when you do use it and you stop it, you'll go through some physical withdrawal symptoms. However, they're usually relatively short-lived, a few days, and then they clear.
Thank you. All right. We got some nuts. Okay, I'll go. The question is, how often does Dr. Goldhamer water fast?
I water fast every day for 12 to 16 hours, and I water fast once a year for a week, and I hate it. I don't like fasting. You can't play basketball. You can't have any fun when you fast. You have to rest. And it's worse for me than my patients because my patients I at least give them access to their computer and some distraction. My wife, who supervises my fast, doesn't let me have my computer because she's mean.
Well, so you actually go to the center once a year and do a fast?
Well, I always used to fast at home with Dr. Morano, my wife, but then last year I thought I was going to be clever because I would get access to my computer. And I said, Jennifer, I'm going to fast at this center this year. And then she said, Oh, you are you? Well, then so am I. And so then I didn't get my computer anyway.
Oh my gosh. So what did you do for, I can't imagine you doing nothing for a week, not basketball. I mean, what did you do?
I know it was terrible, AJ, but I have to say It's probably one of the most important things that I do for myself every year is fast because it does change the way you feel about yourself and the world around you. It has a profound positive effect. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. But it doesn't mean it's pleasant or easy. It's not. I don't like it. I
So,
like the effect of it. I just don't like the process of doing it.
so were you your own medical supervision?
No, I had Dr. Morano supervise me.
Wow. And were you both fasting at the same time?
Well, no, last year we did it at different times.
Wow.
She just kept me from. She said if I went to the center, she was going to come with me, and then I still wouldn't get my computer. So,
Oh my
you know,
gosh. So, but what did you do? Did you read a book? Did you?
no, I rested. I did listen to some audio stuff,
Wow.
but I
So
took it
how
easy. I
many
did what I
days?
was supposed to do.
How many
I
days?
did my sunbathing, and I did all the stuff I was supposed to do, and I drank water.
How many days did you fast? And what was your longest fast?
Well, my longest fast, actually, my longest fast, I had gotten. I was playing basketball. This was about, I don't know, 15 years ago, and I apparently some guy's mouth hit me in the elbow. And so I got a human bite actually, and it became infected. And so I got kind of a swollen elbow. And I ended up having to fast 9 days to clear that. So that was the longest fast I had to do. I've been doing this since I was 16, so I never have to do a very long fast because I've never had any real illness or problems. But, I try to live in such a way that I don't have to fast very long.
Great. Thank you. Is it advantageous to break a fast on avocado and try to prolong ketosis?
No,
Okay. Just that's it, huh? All right.
no, it's a bad way to break a fast. It's ultra concentrated. You're just asking for problems.
Okay. Thank you. This is a question from Barbie. Do we need nuts and seeds for brain health and for heart health?
Well, you need essential fatty acids for brain, heart, and heart health, but there's lots of places you can get essential fatty acids, including green vegetable materials. So I have no problem with nuts and seeds in people that do well with them. Some people, it's not great for them because they have sometimes nuts will act as food triggers for some people and they have trouble not overeating them. And some people are allergic to nuts and tree nuts and so there's no one food that everybody has to eat in order to be healthy, and you don't have to have nuts and seeds. The advantage to nuts and seeds is they're very rich sources of lots of nutrients and a lot of quantity of nutrients in a small package. They're flavorful. They add variety and diversity to the diet. So if you're able to handle nuts and seeds, they're a perfectly acceptable addition to the diet in small quantities, up to an ounce a day. We recommend nuts be used fresh, raw, and not roasted, salted, and processed as they often are, not in the form of nut butters. Preferably out of the shell where they're still fresh, stored in the freezers. And just be careful about the quantity on these things. These are one of the few foods we don't say just eat with abandon. We recommend specific quantity control.
Thank you. Well, speaking of quantity control, on Instagram, Green Food Lover says, can I treat dark chocolate cravings with a water fast? And if so, how long would the fast be?
Well, I don't know how long it's going to be. That would depend on your, the individual things in your physiology, but even a fast as short as 5 days is often helpful at people breaking their addictions, whether it's nicotine, drugs, chocolate, whatever. Sometimes it doesn't take a really long fast to have a meaningful effect on altering taste neuroadaptation and allowing people to get free of some of their addictions.
Mm. Chella says, what about Prolon?
So Prolon is a product that's produced by Walter Longo's group. Before he introduced Prolon, there was virtually no medical offices in the country talking about fasting or intermittent fasting or modified fasting. They came up with this product. It's a bit pricey. I think it's about 250 bucks for 5 days of this powder. It contains macadamia nuts and nutrients. And the idea is that you take this powder and don't eat anything for 5 days a month. They don't talk about changing your diet the rest of the time, but at least those 5 days you're not eating greasy, fatty, processed junk. And that's 15% of the month. And just not eating crap 15% of the month is apparently enough to generate some significant clinical benefit. And so you can do this on your own relatively safely. You don't have to be under inpatient care like you would with fasting. And so they take these powders and substances 5 days a month, and many people have experienced some benefits from that. Um, and it's essentially a fasting modified approach because while you're eating this low caloric material, you go into ketosis, it blunts hunger just like it does during fasting. And not eating bad foods 5 days in a row is apparently enough to stimulate some positive healing response. The other thing it's done is it's monetized fasting. And so now you've gone from no medical offices talking about fasting to 10,000 medical offices selling Prolon. So apparently, one way you can get the attention of medical doctors is give them a product that they can sell.
Okay, thank you. So there's a question on Instagram from Karen. Is a 3-day juice fast beneficial or does it have to be longer?
Well, it just depends on the individual. Some days, 3 days of juice is all that you need in order to make a big difference. For example, sometimes people have an acute infectious response or they're having some congestion or problems from their dietary indiscretions. And if they just take some time off and maybe eat watermelon only for a day, just slice a watermelon every couple hours, or they have vegetable and fruit juices only for a day or two, that is enough to clear the palate, overcome the digestive disruption, give them a little bit of a boost. That can be a safe and effective experience for many people.
Thank you. And there's a question about hair loss on Instagram from
Yes.
Truth Sugar Love. Does water fasting cause hair loss specifically in women?
Yeah, it can because just like pregnancy can result in hair loss and any rapid weight loss can result in hair loss. When you go through rapid weight loss, the brain says, okay, food deprivation stops the hair growing, so then all the hair comes out together. You don't actually lose hair follicles. You just, instead of it maturing over a period of time, it all matures at that point under the physiological stress of weight loss. And then you'll a month later, you'll notice it all coming out together instead of slowly over time. It all grows back. It's not if the problem is the response to fasting or weight loss or pregnancy, it's not a problem that's not correctable. Sometimes other things cause hair loss though, like thyroid dysfunction or other things. So you don't know for sure just because you have hair loss. You want to make sure you evaluate what might be contributing to it. But it's not uncommon for people that experience large amounts of weight rapidly to a month later, a cycle later, to notice that there's hair thinning. And then over time, that grows back, and people are usually perfectly happy with the end result.
Thank you. Okay. My partner says no olive oil, nada, but a friend says the belief that olive oil is not healthy has been debunked. Who is right?
Olive oil is not healthy. It's less bad, though, than some other things, but being less bad doesn't make it good. It just makes it less bad than other types of oil.
Okay. Do you want to expound on that at all or?
Yeah, they go, people make errors of attribution. They have diets that are rich in olive oil, but are lower in dead, decaying flesh or other problems. And so if you shove in olive oil instead of meat, it may be less bad than the meat, and therefore you have a net overall less bad outcome. But that doesn't mean the olive oil is the reason. It's because these diets are also rich in plants and other foods. So let's not pretend that just because something's less bad, it's good. It's not. And olive oil, like all oils, are 9 calories per gram of highly fractionated fat. And, it makes it much more challenging for people to lose weight when they're eating fats because they absorb those fats very efficiently. McDougall used to talk about the fat you eat is the fat you wear. And I think he's right. He also used to say that people love good news about their bad habits. People like oil, and then when they realize how damaging oil and fried foods are, somebody comes up and that's selling olive oil tries to tell them, well, theirs is special and different. They want to believe it. I understand that. It's just not accurate.
Okay. Thanks. Let me get back to the Hoover app where all these questions are. I am a menopausal 52-year-old, so I guess woman, menopausal. I follow a plant-based diet, 80% vegetarian, 20%. I exercise 5 out of 7 days. I cannot lose weight. Any tips, suggestions, or recommendations?
Yeah, it's probably the 20% that's not the 80% that's creating the sluggishness. So you're a female, you've got estrogen, it makes you highly efficient at storing fat. You're exercising and trying to eat well, but not eating well enough to be able to allow your body to lose the weight. You probably also have really good plumbing, so you probably absorb stuff very efficiently. That means you need to stop eating the 20% of things that are not whole natural foods and reduce the overall quantity by eating more salads and steamed vegetables And my guess is you'll start losing weight. And if you're an average woman, you should expect to see about 2 pounds a week be able to come off if you do everything right. If it's still too sluggish, we can try to reboot your system with a fast. That'll certainly mobilize fat and visceral fat, but ultimately it's still going to be about getting you to eat more low density food.
Great. Thank you. The question is, you had talked about in your talk in Vegas about reductions in LP little a, and the person
Yes.
wanted to know if those results from fasting, if they were permanent.
Well, we don't know if they're permanent yet because that would mean, decades of tracking. What we do know is that we had 6 month follow-ups on the first gentleman that had 40% reduction in lipoprotein little a, and he did maintain. In fact, he went down even a little bit further. And so, we're going to need some long-term follow-up to see, does it recur? Does it continue to stay down? There's even more fundamental question. Do vegetarians that have elevated lipoprotein little a, are they actually at risk for cardiovascular disease? Because it turns out even these people that have elevated lipoprotein little a and elevated cholesterol, for example, typically don't get cardiovascular disease if they're vegan. So it may be that we're lowering something, but it may not be necessarily that they're at particular risk anyway because of their healthy diet. But so a little bit more research needs to be done there.
Thank you. Do you know any resources for finding doctors that support a whole food plant-based SOS-free lifestyle? In
Yeah. You come to the True North Health Center or go to our telemedicine site because that's where, if you find doctors like that, let us know and we'll add them to our site or our practice because, we search the world looking for doctors that are, supportive of health promoting habits and practices. And they're few and far between. But if you want to have a better chance of finding, go to the lifestyle medicine websites. There's about 2,000 lifestyle medicine doctors out there, and many of them are supportive of health promoting plant-based diets. And so that would be another one. But we do have a telemedicine practice. These doctors are all well versed in helping people actually get well. And so if you want a doctor that's not an idiot, you want to talk to them, you can certainly log in and utilize our services.
Thank you. How do you build muscle while also losing fat?
You have to um, do enough resistance training to stimulate anabolic growth. And that means eating a healthy diet that's rich in nutrients but low in excess calories. And it is slower than if you're eating meat because the meat has a contaminant anabolic steroids that comes from the chemicals we give to cows and animals to make them bigger. And so those drugs pass through to you. So you will grow faster on animal-based diets, not necessarily healthier though. So you eat enough extra calories from whole natural foods, do the resistance training, and slowly but surely you can build muscle mass if that's your goal. And there are a lot of these natural lifters that are able to show you that they can become hypertrophied even without resorting to taking the steroids associated with animal products.
Thank you. Question is, Hari Hachibu says to stop eating when 80% full. I saw something that said eating until full will make you tired and lead to brain fog, causing procrastination. Do you agree with that statement?
I think there's another way to look at it. If you eat to your full, not 80% full, because how do you decide that? But if you eat to your full, but on low density foods, you'll eat 80% less calories than the person that eats till they're full on high density food. So I would suggest that keeping yourself 80% full makes a lot of sense. And the way to do that is to eat low density foods that are high in fiber so you feel full before you're stuffed.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Are there any benefits to hydrogen water tablets, molecular hydrogen?
Well, to the degree that water is useful, it's not useful just because you're playing around with it and trying to sell people hokum. But as far as I'm concerned, trying to manipulate the water molecules hasn't really been shown to be uh, a productive, except for making people money selling various contraptions. But then I'm a skeptic and a cynic. So if there's actually legitimate literature out there, I'd be happy to review it.
Thank you. Do you think grounding is healthful?
Well, to the degree that people are outside walking in the bare feet on grass and getting exercise and being in the sun, it's probably tremendously helpful. As
Thank you.
far as whether the theory about electrical conductivity being neutralized is helpful, I don't know. It's an interesting thought. I haven't seen any what I would consider credible outcome data, but I don't see any harm in it. So if people want to walk barefoot in the grass, it sounds good. Just be careful not to cut your toes and stuff.
Thanks. In general, how many fasting days are needed to see skin improvements like moles and warts?
Oh gosh, it really varies. I mean, we've got some published papers showing, seborrheic keratotic lesions disappearing with, fast of, relatively moderate durations, 2, 3 weeks. Generally, when you have tumors and growths and bumps, you think longer fast rather than shorter fast, but that's not always the case. In fact, sometimes just the dietary change alone is enough to give the body's immune system a chance to kind of get itself rebalanced.
Thank you. How do you feel about IV and other cancer treatments? How do you find providers that do those types of IVs? I'm thinking
Well,
more
if
the
you go
whole.
to the functional medicine doctors, they're the ones that are thinking nutritional deficiency rather than dietary excess, and they'll be giving you, happy to sell you IVs full of various nutrients and other substances. So functional medicine doctors are the people that I think to look there. Lifestyle medicine doctors are the ones that usually are focusing on diet and lifestyle and exercise and that type of stuff.
Thank you. Many people lose weight on a whole food plant-based diet, but how about gaining weight? How do we gain weight without overdoing the carbs? I find it's also difficult to get
Yes.
adequate plant-based protein intake, especially if we avoid highly processed proteins like those in shakes, soy.
No. It's not hard to get enough protein. You need 10% of your calories from protein. You do that relatively easily. If you ate nothing but brown rice and broccoli, you'd get enough protein. Getting enough protein is not the problem. It's avoiding excess protein that's the problem. And so, if your diet is able to include nuts, seeds, beans, these are very protein-rich foods. There's really not even a challenge getting enough quantity of protein and quality of protein. So, if you want to gain weight, though, you hopefully you're trying to gain muscle, not fat. To gain fat, all you do is eat more calories, and you're going to gain fat. But if you want to gain muscle, you have to actually stimulate the body to produce more muscle cell, and that means you're going to need to do exercise. And usually, resistance training will be most effective at helping build muscle mass. You can also do it by using your body appropriately, walking, hiking, biking, swimming, calisthenics, etc. But if you want to grow more muscle quicker, you might include some weight training, resistance training. You need enough calories to meet your needs. And if you get enough calories, you'll get enough protein. So you don't need to supplement the protein in order to be able to get your nutrient needs met.
Thank you. Is it okay to prefer eating potatoes and sweet potatoes to grains because I find that grains taste bland without salt?
Well, eventually your salt cravings may become more mitigated. But yes, starchy vegetables are wonderful. They're probably a little easier to digest for some people. And I've got no problem. If you want to get all of your carbohydrates from starchy vegetables, that's perfectly fine with me. The reason that grains and beans are nice is one, they're very nutrient dense. They're also very cost effective. That's why billions of people on the planet that make less than $5 a day equivalent live on rice and beans because they're the most cost effective calories out there. But they aren't required. People don't have to do those in order to be healthy. But having a variety of foods, rice, beans, starchy vegetables, does add novelty and variety to the diet. They do have different effects on the microbiome. Some of the benefits of beans might be, changes that happen with the microbiome. Same thing with, they talk about having 30 or 40 different foods a week is a desirable goal. And so, not much trouble if you're eating like AJ recommends, you're going to get a wide variety of fruits and vegetables and material. And that is thought to be helpful in maintaining diversity in the gut microbiome, not just eating two or three things over and over again, but eating a variety of foods. That's also why these cookbooks are interesting because they introduce people to new foods and different ways of putting the foods together, different novel appearances. So not just the flavor, but also how the food looks. And that's one of the things I think that's especially when people are making a transition to healthy eating, you're trying to give them some novelty and some aesthetics and all that kind of stuff. As people get farther and farther into the diet, they like the food more and more, and they need less entertainment in order to be able to enjoy their food.
Thank you. Have you seen fasting help with polyneuropathy?
Well, I'm not sure if I know exactly what is being described as polyneuropathy, but different neuropathic problems. Let's just talk about neuropathy in general, because I'm not sure exactly what they're saying when they say polyneuropathy. But Nerve condition problems in general can be more stubborn than other types of problems. It doesn't mean they won't respond. Neuropathy often does respond to fasting, but it may be because, like, I'll give you an example. I had a woman who'd had 2 years of diagnostics for bilateral peripheral neuropathy, and they couldn't figure it out. And they'd done the MRIs, they did the scans. She didn't have tumors. They didn't know what it was. And she called and said she'd like to do a fast to see if that would affect her neuropathy. And in preparation for fasting, she went on a whole plant food SOS free diet, which got rid of the gluten. And it turned out she was super sensitive to gluten. And once she got off the gluten, she got better. We never even got a chance to fast her because by the time she was ready to come in and fast, she was already well. The only thing every one of the doctors she had seen had agreed on, they disagreed on most things, but the only thing they all agreed on is that diet had nothing to do with neuropathy and it didn't matter what she ate. And it turned out the one thing that actually worked was just getting her off of wheat and dairy products.
Nice. Is mostly fruit plus raw veggies, is that diet healthy? Can you give a counter argument to fruit is our species specific diet? Do we have a species specific diet? If so, what is it? Is the
Well, first of
healthy?
all, the fruit that you have accessible today is not the fruit that people evolved on. The wild fruits, if you go to Hawaii, they're very fibrous. They look more like your vegetables today. So this idea that we're supposed to eat nothing but big bundles of fruit is, I think, nonsense. Second of all, fruit is perfectly healthy food, but again, the fruits that we're eating today are very high in sugar, lower in mineral content, and people that eat fruitarian diets oftentimes develop problems. And the problems include nutrient depletion issues, recurrent infections, emotional volatility, because that's what happens on a high fruit, high sugar diet. And that's what fruitarian diets typically are. Lots of sugar, lots of fat from nuts and oils. Some of them include alcohol, because for some reason that gets included. And I think that's nonsense and not health promoting. On the other hand, there are people that eat raw food diets that are healthy, but they tend to eat high vegetable content, high mineral content diets. So lots of vegetables, and they tend to use blenders and juicers to process those vegetables so they can get enough calories in. I got news for you though. We've been using heat to process our food, our starchy vegetables, longer than we've been using blenders and juices. So for modern humans, part of the reason we were able to develop this large bulbous neuronal net that burns so much glucose is because we did use heat to dextrinize our starchy vegetable materials. And I think that the most natural diet for modern humans is a diet that includes cooked vegetable material. So do you have to do that? No, no, you can put a diet together that excludes that. And if if you prefer to do that, just do it healthfully, get a high mineral content, don't overload the fruit, and hopefully you'll be able to thrive with that. But for most people, I think what works more practically and certainly has a higher adherence and compliance level is a diet that's abundant in raw fruits and vegetables and enough cooked vegetables so that you can get enough calories so you don't disappear. And for some people, they're not able to get enough calories out of raw fruit and vegetables alone. And as a consequence, they need to either eat too much in the way of nuts and sugars or more healthfully, from my viewpoint, eat steamed starchy vegetable materials, potatoes, sweet potatoes, squashes, those things. You don't have to eat grains and beans if you don't digest them or you're having trouble with that, but you do need to get enough starchy vegetable material to meet your caloric needs so that over the long run you can sustain optimum health and function.
Yeah. So how much fruit do you recommend people consume?
Well, I suggest in general, just as a general rule of thumb, one fruit-based meal and two vegetable-based meals a day. That fruit meal should have greens like lettuce and celery and cucumbers and all that kind of stuff with it. And if people are eating more than that, let's say, for example, you have kids, you might do a fruit snack or something, a fourth meal out of fruit and greens. But generally, again, it depends if you're talking about by volume or calories. By volume, a third of the diet might be fruit, but by calories, the majority of the calories are going to come from starchy vegetable materials.
Right. So the question is I think I don't know if I got to this part. Do we have a species specific diet? What is it? And is the Goldhamer diet the healthiest diet?
Well, it's not the Goldhamer diet. It's a whole plant food diet that is a variety of fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. The absolute specifics will be varied a little bit depending on the needs of the person. Obviously, a 35-year-old roofer is going to have different caloric needs and different dietary needs to some degree than the 95-year-old more passive person that's not doing as much physical activity. They're going to need different amount of calories. And so therefore, as long as you can get enough total calories into the feeding bag in your 8-hour window, you're likely to thrive if it's entirely derived from whole natural foods. If your caloric needs are higher, you're burning 3,500 calories a day, you might need more steamed starchy vegetables. If you have kids, maybe you give them rice pasta instead of rice so that you can get more caloric density in so there's not empty room left to fill at school with that federally subsidized school lunch program that's full of crap. So it depends on who it is you're talking about, what you're trying to accomplish. And also sometimes there's practical matters. Some people, they work in jobs that they don't even have but 30 minutes for their lunch break. So they may need to have a different food than the food where the person can actually have an adequate amount of time to chew and swallow and go through that. So you have to kind of adapt the diet to meet the actual practical limitations of the person that's consuming it. Fruits and vegetables, for example, cost 10 times as much per calorie as rice and beans. And so to say, oh, everybody should be on a raw fruit and vegetable diet is a pretty elitist thing because, not everybody has the economic resources to even be able to afford to do that. Big parts of the world, there's no way they can get 2,000 calories of fruits and vegetables on an income that doesn't provide for that.
Well, I don't know how you get enough calories from fruits and vegetables unless you're including, some fat source like nuts, seeds, and avocado.
Well, either they do the diet and they do the raw food diet initially and they use their reserves and they're fine for a year or two as they get rid of their fat. And then they start getting depletion problems. And every time I talk to these groups and I start describing what happens to people once they've depleted their reserves, and they're all like shaking their heads, yeah, that's exactly what happened to them.
Well, you have somebody that lectures at True North that eats this way.
We absolutely do, but that individual is diligent about eating large quantities of vegetable material and they manage to be able to maintain health doing it. It's
Yeah.
also, kind of a full-time job, so it takes a lot of effort.
Do you think, because at the Plant Powered Party, Chris Wark, who has recovered from cancer, and Brenda Davis, and a lot of the speakers were talking, at least from healing from cancer, that they seem to think that doing it 100% raw is better.
Well, I'd like to see the data that supports that. That's certainly interesting. And if you want to do it and you do it right, where you get lots of vegetable materials and don't get into depletion, I got no problem with it. I don't know that that's been my experience, though. Many of the patients that we have, including the ones we've published case reports on, are eating exactly the diet we're advocating. Large quantities of raw fruit and vegetables and enough steamed starchy vegetables to meet their caloric needs. And that has worked well, including, 10-year follow-ups with cancer patients that are, well documented to be well. So, I don't have a problem with the idea. If somebody wants to do a raw food diet, I'm just asking them to get enough minerals in through the vegetable material so that they don't get into depletion problems.
Right, right. And like you were
And
saying,
like you said, we have one instructor on our staff to teach people how to do it properly. And that's
right.
it's certainly not a thing I'm objecting to. I just know it's even more difficult practically to implement that diet properly than it is the simpler whole plant food SOS-free diet that we advocate routinely.
Right. And some people, and you're saying today's fruit isn't the fruit of our ancestors.
No, no, it's clearly not. We've got hybridized sugar balls that are low in fiber and very high in sugar. So be
because
careful getting too carried away.
I find a lot of people I know that do follow raw, they just to get enough calories, it's like they rely on dates and bananas.
Well, dates and bananas, olive oil, and I'm telling you, if you go to all these raw restaurants, they often are selling alcohol.
Yeah. Well, what I find interesting is on, the people that are in the SOS free world and they go on those cruises, they told me that like most of the people were drinking, like they were very strict about the food. It was SOS free, but even the people that were like,
Well, alcohol is cancer juice. So the real question is, how much cancer do you want? So it's not the only way to get cancer, but it really helps. It's like throwing gasoline on the fire of inflammation. I think that's becoming more accepted now that alcohol, including red wine, including organic red wine, is not health food.
I had Dan, listen, I'm not disagreeing with you. I had Dan Buettner on the show the other day, and he talks about the blue zones and how just that it's just been part of the longevity, for years, the drinking of the wine, not other types of
Yeah,
liquor.
it doesn't mean it has anything to do with the wine. It just means despite the wine, they still manage to not die from poisoning themselves with Western style foods.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Goldhamer, you've stated and written that 90 over 60 blood pressure is optimal and that every 1% increase of systolic correlates with a 1% increase in risk of death this year. What is the basis for that assertion?
There was some research that was done by Pito, I believe, at Cornell, and that was his observation. I don't have the specific title to give you, but you might be able to find it. I think there's a general consensus, though, and I think it's been reflected in the recommendations that are made even by the standard cardiology associations, is that healthy blood pressure is different than normal blood pressure, that 120 over 80 still has increased risk factors compared to 90 over 60. And that what we find on these diets is blood pressure tends to normalize on average, much lower than the standard levels that happen on people on higher salt diets and that are overweight. And our patients often do get in that 90 or 100 over 60 range. And so it is consistent with my observation that lower blood pressure is healthier blood pressure. And there is some data out there that there's a reduced risk for every point systolic blood pressure goes more towards the normal realm.
Thank you. I have a friend who is paleo carnivore. She had positive results, which have reinforced her belief that this is a healthy way to eat. She lost a lot of weight. Her blood work has been better and good. What factors are contributing to the false positives of this way of eating that makes it seem healthy?
Okay, you got to give me the big first part of that again, AJ. What was the false positive?
Well, they're saying I have a friend who's paleo carnivore who had positive results. It
Well,
reinforced.
of course, if you don't eat refined carbohydrates, you're going to get positive results, even if you're eating too much dead, decaying flesh. So, there's look at people who are already eating meat and stuff 3 times a day, right? They're eating it every meal. And when they stop eating sugars, they get benefit. It's not the meat that they're getting benefit from. The advantage of being on a paleo diet is it has a fasting mimicking effect. When you get rid of carbohydrate, your brain goes into conservation mode and you get a hunger blunting effect. So the tendency to overeat is reduced. It's just not a diet that you want to sustain long term. People on high fat, high protein diets get sick long term. Now, the problem is short term, being fat is so dangerous that whatever you do to lose fat may have a short term benefit. Even taking these drugs, these Ozempic, these um, GLP inhibitor drugs, sure, they make you nauseous, they get gastric motility, they're going to make you sick in the long run, but in the short run, you may lose weight because you're so nauseous you don't even eat as much of the junk that you're normally shoving in. So yes, you can get short-term benefit, and that short-term benefit may be real. It's just not necessarily a long-term sustainable health promoting model. That's not what we're interested in advocating. We want to advocate a diet that people can sustain long-term so that the last 20 years of their life are positive instead of miserable. And the way you do that, from my experience, has been adopting a health promoting diet based on whole plant foods, exercise regularly and appropriately, get plenty of sleep, fast every day for 12 hours, and occasionally we believe that fasting for a week or so on a preventative basis may be additive. We haven't proven that yet. So we're going to do some studies to look at that. That's going to be our long-term navigator study.
Thank you. When writing the pleasure trap, did you and Dr. Lyle ever have any disagreements? And if so, how did you solve them?
Yeah, we had tremendous discussions, not so much disagreements, but my job was to challenge Dr. Lyle. He's almost always right, but he isn't always right. So occasionally I'll be able to catch him in a intellectual error. And so we would have vivid discussions, accurate and intense discussions, trying to where I would try to attack his belief system and come up with some alternative scenario, and then he would correct that inappropriate thinking. And they sometimes got very heated. And so we had what were called the green chairs. And so when we started getting, volume started going up, Jennifer would come in and say, "Okay, boys, it's time for the green chairs." And we would go to the far end of the house where the doors would close. And we had two green chairs in there that we would sit in and scream at each other until we came to a conclusion of who was right or who was wrong. Now, I have to say, almost always he was right, but not always. And sometimes I was able to challenge some of his beliefs. And as a consequence, if you read The Pleasure Trap, you'll find there really isn't anything that we would change today because we kept him from making, out of the 200 conclusions, we kept the two or three that would have been mistakes from getting into the book. Um, uh, he's really, really smart. And sometimes it works to his disadvantage because he's so smart and he's so often right that he always assumes he's right. And so by being able to challenge him and make sure he is right, I think it was a useful service. And of course, it also helped me understand why many of the things I thought were completely wrong. And he was able to compellingly and convincingly teach me that.
So you don't disagree about very much.
there's there factually no, because I mean the truth is if we disagree, we just keep arguing and researching until we find the facts. I'll give you an example where we disagreed. He insisted that chocolate was just as much of a problem for men as women. And I knew from my experience that it was a much bigger issue for women. Women were just far more vulnerable to the addictive properties of chocolate than men were. And he said, no, that's ridiculous. It's the same. And we actually went to the literature, we did the research, and it turned out I was right and he was wrong. It was very clear that there was a bigger issue, and there were a lot of different explanations of why that was true. So, minor point, but an important point because it was one where, I insisted that that wasn't consistent with my experience. Most of the time, he does a thorough job of research. He has tremendous intellectual capacity. He thought the processes through. I'll give you an example where I was wrong. We talked about the motivational triad. He insisted that it was energy conservation, pain avoidance, and pleasure seeking. And I completely agreed with the pleasure seeking and pain avoidance, but I didn't understand how energy conservation could be such a fundamental part of the motivational triad of human beings. Turns out he's completely right. I just didn't know it. But by the time we went through some arguing, he made it clear to me, and then I, was willing to concede that yes, he was once again correct.
Do you guys agree on who's better in basketball?
There's no question he's better in basketball. I mean, that's a very objective, easily demonstrated that we've proven over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Now, I work harder at it. I try harder, but trying hard and working hard is all nice, but it doesn't change the fact that he's got higher skill level, higher talent, and an intellectual understanding of how the processes work. Now, in fairness, I've become much, much better than I was because he showed me, how to shoot the basketball and what the principles were. But the reality is he's better. I'm hoping that as he ages out, hopefully he'll age out just a little quicker than I will. Perhaps maybe in our mid 80s, I'll finally be able to beat him. Because, occasionally he has a piece of organic vegan carrot cake.
That's funny. It's funny that that was the one complaint we got about the food is that there wasn't dessert other than fruit, except at one meal. People
But
wanted.
they wanted food to eat after they were completely full of all that wonderful food. They wanted some additional food.
Well, I guess they felt it was, was special. It was a conference. We should have, like
Right.
dessert at every meal.
Well,
So,
why don't you come up with some AJ specials
oh
for
no,
next
no, I, I,
conference?
I told them I would be happy to even make them next year. So yeah, mark your
Yeah. Well,
calendars,
you
guys.
might have to make them though, AJ. If you want them to be good but not be unhealthy, you might have to actually make
I'd
them
be,
because I'm
I'd
not
be,
sure that anybody else is going to be able to figure out how to do that.
be happy to do that. Mark your calendar now, September 4th through 6th, Plant Power Party, numero
Now, when is it?
September 4th through 6th. It's still Labor Day, except that Labor Day is a little bit later next year. It's the first week of
So
September
it's September 4th
through
through
6th.
the 6th, and that's going
One
to be in
in
the Sin
same,
City again.
absolutely. And you got to get to the Sphere if you go. It's just the most incredible venue I've ever been to. So modern hybridized fruit is so sweet compared to 100 years ago, especially compared to what our ancestors ate. So is it something that shouldn't be eaten in large quantities?
Well, obviously there's some variation in people. Some people can handle a much higher concentration of fruit in their diet than other people can handle in their diet. For example, diabetics, sometimes we don't use fruit at all with diabetics until their, insulin resistance is reduced and they can handle limited quantities of fruit. Other people can have a higher, they might have two meals a day fruit-based and one meal a day vegetable-based and thrive and do well. So I don't know that I think the biggest thing is avoid the processed foods, the fruit juices, that not so much the dried fruits and all that stuff, but stick to whole fruit as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, so they're saying that grapes seem to be mostly sugar. So what's healthier to eat, sweet potatoes or green grapes?
Well, I mean, healthier to eat, depending on what you're trying to do. Sweet potatoes are wonderful, healthy food. Grapes are wonderful, healthy food. If I had to pick, if I had to just live on one or the other, I'd pick the sweet potatoes. But
Yeah.
you don't. That's the nice thing. You get to have a variety, 30 different foods or more a week. Lots of different vegetables, lots of different fruit, different non-glutinous grains, different beans. There's so much abundance out there, and but just rotating those different foods in there seems to be consistent with getting the diversity of nutrients you need as well as supporting a diverse microbiome.
Nice. Okay. Some
So
people say,
AJ, I know we have some more. I'm sorry that we didn't get
yeah,
to all of them,
yeah.
but
No,
I
we're
have
done. We
to.
actually had only one more question. I'll ask it really, really quick. What would you
Okay.
like to spend more time doing now that you're not doing now? That's the last question.
Oh, I would like to have more time to play basketball.
I knew you were going to say that.
Because I have enough time to play. I get the aerobic stuff, but I don't have enough time to practice. I'd like to spend more time in the lab, working on the very specifics of the shot. I'd like to get more coaching to learn. The problem is I'm not that good in terms of physical abilities. I make the most of what I've got, so I can be competitive with the people I play with, but I don't have a lot of natural talent. It's all grinded out. So I need more practice. Somebody like Dr. Lyle is natural. So it comes quickly and relatively easy to him. For me, everything is kind of a grind. And so I have to, it's like musicians. Some people can pick the stuff up and they're just a natural. And other people, they can learn to play, but they have to really practice a lot. So I'd like more time to practice. I can't right now, though, because I don't have enough time to be able to even meet my responsibilities at True North in terms of screening calls and all that stuff. So I've got to work on getting more efficient. We're on September 28th, we're launching a new software program that we've spent 3 years developing. And it's supposed to make us dramatically more efficient. It even incorporates AI and other, resources. And I'm hoping that that's going to help save a lot of time for me because a lot of the stuff I have to do manually is going to be automated. So we'll see how it turns out, but maybe that'll get me more time in the gym. How about you, AJ? What would you do more of? Uh,
Improv comedy. My improv is
Improv comedy.
basketball. Yeah. And
Well,
like you, I
it's
don't know.
time to do more improv comedy then.
Absolutely. That's my dream.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, and you're fabulous at it. I'll be looking forward to seeing you do more of it. Actually, I think everybody could use a lot more laughter. So I think that's important and a useful use of your skills and talents.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Goldhamer. This was wonderful. Take care.
Bye-bye.
And good, safe travels to Lithuania. Thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ and Friends. Please come back next.